Well, at 16 years old, you met a guy named Cambodian Peter.
Yes.
And he was the daima of the Fuk Ching gang. The daima is basically the leader, right?
The daima is a step above the street soldier, let's say. Like, this is how I rank it based upon what I see and what my experiences were, okay? In the Chinese gangs, you have the associates, the people who hang around the gangs. They didn't get initiated. They just like to hang around the gangs, and they call themselves the Ghost Shadows or whatever, okay? And then you have the soldiers. The soldiers, those were the ones who went through the initiation process. They fall under the daima, who's a step above them, okay? And it's like a crew of maybe 5, 6 people through my experience. And then the daima answers to a dailo, okay? And that's his boss. And then that dailo answers to another dailo above him, okay? So what would you call that? We call everyone who's above us a dailo. Any rank above us, we call a dailo. So we also have to call him a dailo as well. So, and then that dailo at the top has their connections to the tongues.
Okay, so through Cambodian Peter, you joined the gang.
Yes.
Okay, was there a process leading up to it? Like, for example, I interview a lot of mafia guys. And, first you become kind of an associate, and you have to go through a whole bunch of process, and then they open up the books at certain times where they actually make made men, and then they go through that process. So what led up to you actually joining the gang officially?
It's not like a Hollywood style, type of thing where there's a process you have to go through, It was a new gang for me, based on my experience. It was a new gang. He was there to recruit. He was sent out there to Brooklyn to recruit because Chinatown was, all the streets were taken in Chinatown except the outskirts. Besides, everything was focused on Ma Street, Pell Street, East Broadway by then, Pell Street, Doyle Street. So the Fuk Ching had to go to the outskirts of Chinatown, like Eldridge Street, Christie Street, where really nothing was going on. So they wanted to expand their territory. So they sent a daima, the dailo sent the daima to Brooklyn to do recruiting. So he went out there on his own, basically. He only had one guy with him, Big Chicken, right? He only had one guy with him, sent out there to do recruiting. He had one other member. And I was a second member under Cambodian Peter at that time. So it was all like new. It was just starting up, the Fuk Ching in the Brooklyn faction. And then from there, Big Chicken brought in a couple of his guys, and I brought in a couple of my guys, and then that's when it started expanding. And then in a matter of like a year, I would say, we had 30 members.
Well, talk about the actual ritual of becoming a made man in this gang.
Oh, the ritual was like this. Okay, what year was this? I met Cambodian Peter sometime around 1986. Okay, if I remember correctly, the ritual was sometime around. It wasn't that early. Could be 88, 89, somewhere around there. The dailo called me to come in. I didn't know what he called me to come in for. It was me, Carrot Head, and this other kid. I'm not gonna mention his name. He's still around, but he lives on Avenue, right off Avenue U in Brooklyn. It was the 3 of us. We went to the dailo's apartment, because the dailo would rent out apartments for the crew. So he would pay for the apartment, pay for the meals, pay for whatever expenses. But we went to his apartment, and everything was laid out. The incense, the rice wine, and the cups and the chopsticks. It's all laid out like how you see like a typical shrine with the general Quan in these businesses these Chinese establishments that you go to. A lot of them have the general Quan facing the door to protect the business. So if you ever go into a Chinese business and you see the General Quan, is always facing the door, with the battle axe up. And with the ritual, the battle axe is down with the black shoes, but in the business you will see the General Quan with the battle axe up with the red shoes, and he would recite his words, like the typical words that, depending on which title you have, whatever he say, the loyalty to the brothers, and all kinds of stuff that he says, which, we repeat what he said, and then we prick our finger with blood, drop it in the wine, and then offer to General Port, and do it as an offering to General Quan with the chicken and everything. So it was a simple ritual. Unlike the triad members, the ritual is a lot more elaborate. Like I interviewed my uncle, who was a 14K triad member, and he explained how they did their ritual, and it was like totally different than ours. Ours was like the generic version, copying from the triads.
Oh, okay. Well, before you actually went through the whole ritual, you were an active member in this gang while still in high school. So you come back to high school and now you have these bullies, but you now are in a gang. So what changes at that point?
You know what? From kindergarten all the way up to the 11th grade, as you call it nowadays, right? Right before my senior year, that's when I met Cambodian Peter. My grades were very good, and I had like perfect attendance basically. So, and my average was high enough that even during my senior year, I missed out on a lot of classes. I was still able to graduate with a high school diploma, and I aced all the regions, and I even graduated with a region's diploma. So I rarely went to school during my senior year, right? So when I became a gang member, going back to school in my senior year for a couple of days here and there, because I cut out most of the time and I missed a lot of classes, I dressed differently, I acted differently, and people could tell, if you're afraid, people can tell. Bullies can sense weakness, all right? So on my first day of school, back in the first day, during my senior year, I got into a fight, okay? Because, I guess they were testing me, and I put a stop to that, because I was the one who initiated that fight. It doesn't matter if this kid was bigger than me or whatever, because I know for a fact that if I lose, I will go back after him. My friends will go back after him, and we'll get away with it because there's so many killings out there. They just don't care. There's so many homicides. You're talking about during that time, the homicide rate in New York City was close to 2,400 a year. They just don't care. Like gang members killing gang members, let them kill each other. That was the mentality of the cops back then.
So as you're talking, you said that during that time, there are 2,400 homicides a year in New York City. If you fast forward to 2024, there is 377 homicides in New York City. So you're talking about 1/7 the number as it was before. So a huge difference between now and then.
Huge. Just look at all the shots fired, all the killings and all the shootings on East Broadway, Mott Street, and Pell Street. Look in the archives. And not everything makes the papers. Not everything makes the papers. And you still have so many articles about these shootings and killings. Right? Because when a Chinese gang member kills another Chinese gang member, it doesn't even make the police blotter. Right? Sometimes you see a small article in the police blotter, but a lot of times you don't see it. That's why I'm always like, during those times, I would look in the newspaper and I would see all the mistakes they made. Like sometimes there was a couple of articles, the Fuk Ching was involved, and they said they didn't mention any that it was gang related, and one of them mentioned that it was the flying dragons. You know, the reporters don't know. The police know, but by the time the reporters get it, the news is out already. So that's why there's a lot of mistakes in the newspaper articles.
Okay, so in the early days, when you first joined the gang, what type of criminal activities were you involved in initially?
When I first joined, I was only 16 years old. We were doing street robberies, you know, mostly, yeah, and doing extortion. Those were like the crumbs, you know, like what the kids do. You know, you're 16 years old, you figure, you know, you're young and you want to prove something, so you're out there doing street robberies. Most of the kids I was with around that age, between the ages of 14 to around 18, they're doing a lot of street robberies, and by the time they're 18 to like 19, they're doing home invasions. And then after that, once they're in their 20s, they move on to like other rackets, like dealing with drugs and more of the higher level stuff, counterfeit goods and all that.
Okay, so when you say street robberies, these like armed robberies where you just see someone on the street, they look like they have some money, you pull out a gun and take whatever they have, or a little different?
Yeah, sort of like that. Like, you know, basically kids robbing kids. Sometimes, you know, we'll target some business owners or people coming out from the gambling houses, people going in and out of the brothels. You know, like that was what we were doing in our crew of young kids who just joined the gang.
Well, I mean, when you do an armed robbery, a lot of things can go wrong. The person can resist, they might have their own gun, they might try to take your gun from you. Like, what was the worst situation during that time you got into?
I was with Cavahead one day, and I was driving the car, and it was like in the middle of the night, late, and we saw this Jewish guy walking by himself. He was Hasidic with the garb and everything, and I pulled the car around, I parked it around the corner, and we left our car, we had a gun, we went up to him, and stuck him up. And, you know, like the Jewish people with the Hasidic Jews, they wear the garb and they have many, many layers. It was like in the wintertime, and when we asked him for his money, we pointed a gun at him, and he was like really nervous, and he was going from layer to layer, like how many layers was like, it seemed like forever, layer to layer, and then he reached into his pocket and pulled out like a little purse, a coin purse, and opened up the purse, and it seems those seconds seems like forever to us, and he poured out like, I don't know, less than $1, maybe like 80 something cents or whatever. And that was so dangerous, because it was like we're spending so much time with him because he has so many layers. That's one thing I'll never forget. You know, I mean, the risk that we took, we were young and stupid.